The council chamber stretched out like a small planet, its curved walls displaying the homeworlds of 73 different species. Jiwan stood at the human podium, a simple metal stand that looked plain compared to the elaborate platforms of other ambassadors. He had stood here for 20 years, and today would be his last time. The air in the chamber carried the mixed sense of hundreds of different atmospheres, filtered and balanced by systems humans had designed. Jiwan found it fitting that even now, in this final moment, human work surrounded them all, invisibly. I come before this council to announce the withdrawal of humanity from galactic governance, Jiwan said. His voice was calm, steady. He had practiced these words for months, making sure no anger or bitterness would slip through. After 150 years of service, Earth and all human colonies will peacefully separate from the Galactic Council. We will maintain trade relationships with any species who wishes it, but we will no longer participate in council affairs. End quote. A ripple of reaction moved through the chamber. Some species shifted in their seats. Others made sounds that their translators could not quite capture. But mostly, there was a sense of confused dismissal. The Vrelix's council chair, Thon, adjusted his position on his elevated platform. His species looked somewhat like oversized mantises, with long, elegant limbs and complex eyes that saw in spectrums humans could barely imagine. Ambassador Jiwan, Thon said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into flat, formal words. While we respect your people's decision, we must confess, surprise. Has humanity not prospered under council protection? Have we not provided opportunities for your species to contribute to galactic civilization? Jiwan allowed himself a small smile. Contribute. Such a careful word. We have indeed contributed, Chair Thon. We have contributed greatly. And now, we choose to contribute to our own future instead. Beside Thon, Minister Kess of the Myriadan Trade Consortium leaned forward. The Myriadans resembled thick-bodied seals, their skin shifting with patterns that expressed emotion. Kess's patterns showed confusion, and perhaps a hint of concern. But Ambassador, who will maintain the agricultural systems on the border worlds? Your people have managed those stations for decades. You will need to find others for that work, Jiwan replied simply. And the data systems? Another voice called out. This was Grix, a younger Vrelix who worked in the engineering corps. Humans maintain most of the underlying code architecture for council networks. You will need to maintain it yourselves, Jiwan said. Thon made a dismissive gesture with one long limb. Surely such technical matters can be resolved. We have brilliant engineers among every species. If humans could learn these systems, others certainly can. We appreciate your people's adequate service, Ambassador, but let us not overstate humanity's importance. You have been good laborers, nothing more. Jiwan felt young Sora tense beside him. She was his assistant, barely 30 years old, and she still had the idealism that age had worn away from him. He touched her arm gently, a signal to remain calm. They had expected this reaction. They had planned for it. We do not overstate anything, Chair, Jiwan said quietly. We simply state that we are leaving. We came when called. We leave when dismissed. We wish you all well. Dismissed? Thon's translator carried what might have been amusement. No one has dismissed humanity, Ambassador. You are free to remain. You choose to leave. And frankly, I suspect your people will regret this decision. The galaxy is dangerous for isolated species. Perhaps, Jiwan acknowledged, that is our risk to take. The council moved to formal procedures then. Votes were cast. All mere formality. The withdrawal was legal under council law, requiring only notification, and a transition period of 1 standard galactic year. Various species made various statements. Some expressed polite regret. Others seemed relieved, though they hid it poorly. A few, very few, seemed genuinely sad to see humanity go. Admiral Corvin of the Draknor military fleet gave Jiwan a long look across the chamber. The Draknor were warriors, proud and fierce, resembling upright reptiles with complex crests. Corvin had worked with human tactical advisors for years. He said nothing during the proceedings, but his eyes carried a weight of understanding. He, at least, knew what the council was losing. When the session finally ended, Sora walked with Jiwan through the long corridors of the station. Other diplomats passed them, offering polite nods or ignoring them entirely. The station felt the same as always, vast and busy, with thousands of beings moving through its passages on thousands of different errands. They don't understand, Sora said quietly. They really don't see what we do for them. No, Jiwan agreed. They see us as janitors and mechanics, as farmers and code technicians. They think these are simple jobs that anyone could do. We tried to tell them. For years, we tried to show them. Jiwan stopped at a viewing port. Beyond the transparent barrier, space stretched out infinite and cold. Human ships were already gathering in nearby sectors, preparing for the long journey home. Hundreds of vessels, from massive colony transports to small personal craft, all heading back toward Earth and the human colonies. We did tell them, Sora. Many times. But some lessons cannot be taught. They must be learned through experience. He watched the ships for a moment longer. We gave them 150 years of our best efforts. We built their systems. We solved their problems. We did the work that no one else wanted to do, and we did it well. We did it with pride. And they called us adequate laborers, Sora said bitterly. Yes, so now they will learn what adequate truly means. Jiwan turned from the window. Over the next month, humans departed from every corner of council space. They left quietly, without fuss or drama. Engineers packed their tools and boarded transports. Diplomats closed their offices. Medical staff transferred their patients to other doctors. Agricultural managers handed over access codes to the systems they had built. The council barely noticed. Life continued as normal in the Great Chamber and across the vast network of council worlds. There were always problems to solve, disputes to settle, policies to debate. The absence of one species, especially a species considered unremarkable, seemed to change nothing at all. Jiwan spent his last night in council space in his quarters, a modest room he had occupied for 20 years. He had few possessions to pack. Humans learned early to travel light in space. He sat by his own window and watched the stars, thinking about all the years of work, all the patient explanations, all the quiet problem-solving that had gone unnoticed and unappreciated. He was not angry. Anger was exhausting and pointless. He was simply tired and ready to go home. Sora found him there an hour before departure. "The last transport is ready," she said. "Everyone else is already gone." Fomini. "Good." Jiwan stood and took one last look around the room. "You know, Sora, I truly did wish them well. I hope they figure it out." "Figure what out?" "How to take care of themselves." He picked up his single bag and walked to the door. "Because no one is coming to save them anymore." They left the station in darkness, the lights dimming behind them as they walked through passages that humans had wired and maintained. They boarded the last ship, and it undocked with a gentle push of thrusters that human engineers had designed. As they accelerated away, neither of them looked back. 6 months passed, and the council continued its business as it had for thousands of years. Treaties were signed. Trade disputes were resolved. New species petitioned for membership, while older ones complained about regulations and taxes. The vast machine of galactic governance ground forward, slow and certain. Then the data network started failing. It began small. A research station lost access to the central archives for a few hours. A trade manifest disappeared from the system, causing a minor delay at a customs checkpoint. Administrative messages arrived, corrupted or not at all. Each incident seemed insignificant. the kind of technical hiccup that happened occasionally in any large system. But the incidents kept happening, and they grew worse. Grix noticed the pattern first. He was running diagnostics on the station's primary data core when he found blocks of code that were degrading, not damaged by any attack or accident, but simply breaking down as if they were rotting. He traced the code back through layers of system architecture, going deeper and deeper into the foundation of the network. At the bottom, he found something that made his blood run cold. Or rather, he found nothing. Entire sections of the core code were missing, leaving gaps like missing teeth in a mouth. The code that remained was complex and elegant, clearly written by experts. But without constant maintenance and updates, it was slowly failing. Every missing section was tagged with the same identifier: Human Maintenance Division, Section 7. Grix brought his findings to his supervisor, who dismissed them. "The code will adapt," she said. "Systems always do. Assign a team to patch the gaps." But the teams assigned to the work could not understand what the code was supposed to do. It was written in a style that seemed simple on the surface, but revealed layer after layer of subtle complexity the more they examined it. The humans had not just maintained the code. They had built most of it, slowly and quietly, over 150 years. While Grix struggled with data systems, other problems emerged across Council space. A cluster of agricultural stations in the border regions stopped producing food. The automated systems were failing, and no one could figure out why. Teams were sent to investigate, but the stations were complex networks of biological and mechanical systems that required constant adjustment and monitoring. "We need the humans back," one technician reported. "They built these systems. They understood how everything worked together, but the humans were gone, and the Council's pride would not allow them to admit they needed help so soon." Other technicians were brought in. They managed to get some systems running, but at reduced capacity. Food production dropped by 30% across those stations. Shortages began on nearby worlds. Trade routes became dangerous. Pirates had always existed in the empty spaces between stars, small-time raiders who attacked isolated ships. But they had been relatively rare, their attacks limited and predictable. Now piracy surged. Convoys were hit. Trade vessels disappeared. Valuable cargoes vanished into the black. Admiral Corven called an emergency meeting of the military council. "Something has changed," he said. "The pirates are organized now. They know our patrol routes. They strike when and where our ships are not." "How is this possible?" demanded another admiral. "We have the finest intelligence network in the galaxy." "We had a fine intelligence network," Corven corrected, "much of which was managed by human analysts. They had a gift for pattern recognition, for seeing connections that others missed, and they shared their insights with us freely." He paused, looking around the room. "They are not sharing anymore." Minister Kess attended that meeting. He sat quietly in the back, listening to the admirals argue about solutions. He had been thinking a great deal about the humans lately. His own trade networks were suffering from the cascade of small failures spreading through Council space. Shipments were delayed. Contracts were broken. Partners were losing trust in the Council's ability to maintain order. After the meeting, Kess went to his office and began reviewing records. He looked at system failures, security incidents, administrative problems. He went back through years of data, tracking patterns. What he found disturbed him deeply. For every problem the Council now faced, there was a record of humans solving similar problems in the past. Agricultural failures, code corruption, piracy surges, medical crises, diplomatic deadlocks. The humans had dealt with all of it, quietly and efficiently, often before the problems became serious enough for the Council leadership to notice. They had not just done the work no one else wanted. They had done the work no one else even knew needed doing. Kess brought his findings to Chair Thon. The Council chamber was nearly empty, just the two of them in the vast space. "You are overreacting, Minister," Thon said when Kess finished. "We are experiencing a temporary adjustment period. That is all." Other species will step into the roles humans abandoned. The galaxy does not need one species to function. With respect, Chair, I believe the evidence suggests otherwise. Every critical system failure we are experiencing connects to human maintenance work. Every security problem connects to human intelligence analysis. Enough. Thon's translator carried the sharp edge of his annoyance. I will not hear this council diminished by claims that we cannot function without one minor species. Assign more resources to these problems. Hire more technicians. Train more analysts. But do not suggest that we made a mistake in letting the humans leave. Kess left the meeting knowing that Thon would not listen. The chair's pride would not allow him to see the truth, even as the evidence mounted daily. But Kess was a practical being, and he could see what was coming. The council was unraveling, thread by thread, and no one in power wanted to admit it. A medical emergency struck 3 weeks later. A disease outbreak on a mining colony. Nothing unusual at first, but the quarantine protocols failed. The disease spread to transport ships, then to other stations, then to 2 more colonies. Medical teams rushed to contain it, but the infection vectors were complex and kept changing. We need the human epidemiologists, a doctor finally said in desperation. They always caught these things early. They had systems in place, models that predicted spread patterns. We need their data. Ground. But the data was gone, taken with the humans when they left. And the models were too complex for others to reconstruct quickly. By the time the outbreak was contained, 2,000 beings had died. It was not a catastrophic number in a galaxy of trillions, but it was 2,000 deaths that would not have happened if the humans had been there. Grix continued his investigation into the failing systems. He worked late into every night cycle, digging through archives and historical records. He built a comprehensive picture of what humans had actually done during their time in the council. The picture shocked him. They had maintained over 3,000 critical systems. They had built the infrastructure that made galactic trade possible. They had designed the communication networks that linked every council world. They had trained thousands of other beings in various technical skills. They had served as mediators in countless disputes, their neutral status making them acceptable to all sides. They had done all of this while being paid modest salaries and receiving almost no recognition. They were holding us together, Grix whispered to himself, alone in his workshop. And we never even noticed. He wanted to publish his findings, to warn the council about what was coming. But he knew no one would listen. Not yet. The failures were still small enough to ignore, the problems still manageable enough to dismiss. The council would need to fall much further before it would be ready to face the truth. In her apartment on Earth, Sora watched the galactic news feeds. She saw the reports of system failures and disease outbreaks. She saw the statements from council officials promising that everything was under control. She saw the pattern of denial and pride that she had witnessed so many times before. They still don't see it, she said to her roommate, another former diplomat named Hana. Even now, they think they can fix everything without us. They will learn. Hana replied. Give them time. Pride is a slow teacher, but a thorough one. Sora turned off the news and looked out her window at Earth's sky. She had been born on a colony world, had spent her whole life in space stations and ships. Being back on humanity's homeworld felt strange and wonderful. The air smelled like growing things. The gravity was constant and comfortable. She could see weather moving across the sky, rain and clouds and sunlight, all without artificial controls. I don't want to go back, Sora said quietly. Even if they ask us, even if they beg, I don't want to return to a place where our work meant nothing. Then we won't. Hana said simply. We built a new life here. Let them build their own future out there. And across the galaxy, the council continued to fracture, one small failure at a time. 18 months after humanity's departure, colony world Verath 7 went dark. Not just its communications, but everything. Life support, power generation, water recycling, atmospheric processors. Every system that kept 12,000 beings alive simply stopped working. Emergency response teams arrived 3 days later. They found a station in complete chaos. People suffocating in their own waste air. Water reserves exhausted. Backup generators drained. They managed to evacuate most of the population, but 47 beings died before rescue arrived. 47 deaths from systems failure on a council world, something that had not happened in 200 years. The investigation report was damning. Every critical system on Vareth 7 had been designed with human oversight in mind. The systems were brilliant, efficient, and nearly foolproof. But they required regular maintenance and monitoring by people who understood how all the pieces worked together. When that maintenance stopped, the systems had run perfectly for over a year before degrading past the point of recovery. No one had noticed the warnings because the humans had designed the warning systems too, and those had failed first. 3 more colonies experienced similar cascades in the following month. Not as severe as Vareth 7, but severe enough. The council declared a state of emergency and formed a crisis committee. They assigned thousands of technicians to inspect every major installation in council space. What they found terrified them. Nearly everything was breaking down. Slowly, quietly, invisibly, but definitely breaking down. The entire infrastructure of galactic civilization was built on foundations that humans had laid and maintained. Without that maintenance, the foundations were crumbling. The Grand Archive suffered complete data loss. This was perhaps the most devastating failure of all. The archive was the repository of all galactic knowledge, millions of years of accumulated science, history, art, and culture from every member species. It was supposed to be eternal, protected by redundant systems that made data loss impossible. But the archive's underlying structure had been designed by human information specialists, part of a project they had volunteered for 80 years ago. They had built it to last forever, with systems checking systems, layers of protection that seemed excessive at the time. Those layers had maintained the archive perfectly for decades, but they required constant updating and monitoring. When the archive crashed, it crashed completely. Entire sectors of data vanished instantly. The restoration protocols failed because they too had degraded. Backup systems came online but could not interface properly with the corrupted core. Within hours, 2/3 of the galaxy's shared knowledge base was simply gone. Scholars across council space went into mourning. Art that had survived for millennia was lost. Scientific research that had taken thousands of years to compile vanished. Historical records that connected species to their ancestors disappeared. It was a cultural catastrophe that could not be measured or repaired. The humans warned us this could happen, Grix told anyone who would listen. 20 years ago, they submitted a report about archive vulnerability. They requested funding for additional safeguards. The council denied the request because the humans were already maintaining it adequately for free. 3 species formally declared independence from the council, citing its obvious incompetence and inability to provide basic services. These were not minor species but established members with significant territory and resources. Their departure sent shockwaves through the remaining council members. If the structure was falling apart this quickly, how long before everything collapsed? Interstellar commerce dropped by 60%. Trade required trust, and trust required infrastructure. Ships needed to know that stations would have power when they arrived. Merchants needed to know that contracts would be enforced. Passengers needed to know that life support would not fail mid-journey. As failures mounted, that trust evaporated. Human mediators and logistics experts had managed most of the complex trade networks. They had built relationships with every species, learned every culture's business customs, and found ways to make incompatible systems work together. They had been the oil that kept the gears of commerce turning smoothly. Without them, the gears ground against each other until they broke. Minister Kess watched his entire life's work dissolve. He had built the largest trade consortium in council space, a network that spanned hundreds of worlds and generated wealth for millions of beings. Within 18 months of human departure, His consortium was operating at a fraction of its former capacity. Partners were backing out. Supply chains were broken. Trust was gone. He went to Chair Thon with a formal proposal to send a delegation to Earth. The meeting did not go well. Absolutely not, Thon said. His translator carried more anger than Kess had ever heard from the chair. We will not go begging to a species that abandoned us. We will solve these problems ourselves. With respect, Chair, we are not solving them. The problems are getting worse every day. We need help. And the humans have the knowledge we need. The humans chose to leave. Let them live with that choice. Chair, please. Pride cannot keep our systems running. Pride cannot restore the archive. Pride cannot stop our civilization from collapsing. We need to put aside our ego and ask for help. Thon stood, his long body unfolding to its full height, a gesture of dominance among his species. You forget yourself, Minister. The Council does not beg. We will assign more resources to these problems. We will train more specialists. We will adapt. But we will not crawl back to a species of manual laborers and ask them to save us. We're government. We will not crawl. We're government. Kess left the meeting knowing he had lost. Thon would let the Council burn before admitting that humans had been essential. The chair's pride was absolute, and it was going to kill them all. A diplomatic crisis erupted between the Vrelics and the Draknor over a border dispute. It was a minor issue. A disagreement over mining rights in an asteroid belt. Such disputes happened regularly and were always resolved peacefully. But this time, the negotiations broke down completely. Both sides accused the other of bad faith. Tensions escalated. Ships were moved to the border. Weapons were powered up. Admiral Corvin tried to calm the situation from the Draknor side, but his own people were furious and he could not control them. The Vrelics were equally angry. Equally ready for conflict. What should have been a simple negotiation turned into the edge of war. Where are the human mediators? Corvin finally demanded in a military council meeting. They always prevented this kind of stupidity. They knew how to talk to both sides, how to find solutions that everyone could accept. The humans are gone, another admiral replied coldly. We resolve this ourselves or we fight. Those are the only options. The crisis was eventually resolved, but it took 3 months of tense negotiation and cost both sides enormous amounts of resources and goodwill. A problem that humans would have solved in a week nearly destroyed two species' relationship forever. And everyone knew more. Such crises were coming. Grix finished his comprehensive report. It was 2,000 pages long, documenting every human contribution to galactic civilization that he could find. The list was staggering. Humans had their hands in everything, from the smallest maintenance tasks to the largest infrastructure projects. They had been the connective tissue of the Council, linking together species and systems that could not naturally work together. He titled the report, The Invisible Pillars: How Humanity Held the Stars Together, and submitted it to every council member, every news organization, every university and research institution he could find. He expected it would be ignored, dismissed as the obsession of one junior engineer. He was wrong. The report went viral. Within days, everyone in council space had heard of it. Some dismissed it as exaggeration. Others read it carefully and felt growing horror as they recognized the truth. Academic institutions began their own investigations and confirmed Grix's findings. The evidence was overwhelming and impossible to deny. Humanity had not been janitors and technicians who happened to work for the Council. They had been the foundation that everything else was built on. And the Council had driven them away with contempt and disregard. The political pressure became impossible to ignore. Member species began demanding action. Some wanted humans recalled immediately, regardless of cost. Others wanted apologies first, then negotiation. A few still insisted that humans were unnecessary and the Council could recover on its own. But those voices grew quieter as more systems failed and more problems emerged. Chair Thon called an emergency session of the full Council. The chamber was packed, every species represented. galleries filled with observers and media. The tension was electric. Everyone knew this meeting would determine the council's future. Thawne stood at his platform, looking older and more tired than Grix had ever seen him. "We face a crisis," Thawne began. "A crisis of infrastructure, of knowledge, of capacity. We have lost critical capabilities that we did not realize we possessed until they were gone. The question before us now is simple. Do we humble ourselves and ask the humans to return? Or do we continue forward alone?" The debate lasted for hours. Species after species stood and gave their opinion. Some begged for humanity's return. Others angrily demanded it, as if humans could be ordered back to work. A few tried to maintain dignity while acknowledging need. Finally, a vote was called. The result was decisive. 71 species voted to send a formal delegation to Earth. Only 2 voted against. The Council would humble itself after all, though many did it with great reluctance. Kes was chosen to lead the delegation. He accepted the responsibility with mixed feelings. He wanted to help fix the crisis, but he also knew the humans had every right to refuse. The Council had treated them terribly. Why would they come back? He selected a small team, including Grix, whose report had made him something of a celebrity. They prepared their arguments, their offers, their apologies. They prepared for every possible response, except the one they would actually receive. The ship departed for Earth 3 days later. Behind them, the Council continued to crumble, hoping desperately that humanity would save them one more time. The delegation's ship arrived at the edge of human space 3 years and 2 months after humanity's departure. They were met immediately by automated defense systems that politely but firmly told them to wait. They waited for 3 weeks in orbit, around an outer monitoring station, their messages to Earth acknowledged but not answered. Kes used the time to study everything he could find about humanity's current state. What he learned surprised him. Earth had transformed. The homeworld was thriving, its cities rebuilt and expanded, its industries running at peak efficiency. Human colony worlds had pulled back to a tight defensive network, focusing their resources on internal development rather than external expansion. They had built themselves a small but prosperous civilization, completely independent of the Council. They did not need galactic trade anymore. They had everything they required, right here, in their own systems. Finally, on the 22nd day, they received permission to approach Earth. Not to the capital, but to a small administrative station in orbit. Not to meet with ambassadors or leaders, but with a civilian administrator named Hyun who managed external relations. The meeting room was simple and functional, nothing like the elaborate chambers of council space. Hyun arrived alone, a man in his 50s, with gray hair and a calm expression. He sat across from the delegation without ceremony and waited for them to speak. Kes began with the formal apology he had prepared. He spoke of the Council's blindness, its failure to recognize humanity's contributions, its regret for how humans had been treated. He spoke well, with genuine emotion, and he meant every word. Hyun listened politely until Kes finished, then said simply, "Thank you for the apology. What do you want?" "We want humanity to return to the Council," Kes said. "We need your help. Our systems are failing. Our civilization is coming apart. We were wrong about your importance, and we are willing to admit that now. You need us to fix your problems," Hyun said. It was not a question. Yes. And in return, we offer you anything you want. Wealth, territory, positions of leadership in the Council. Name your price. Hyun was quiet for a moment, then stood and walked to the window. Earth turned below them, blue and white and beautiful. "Let me tell you what happened after we left," he said. "We came home to a world that many of us had never seen. We had been spread across the galaxy, doing work that no one appreciated, for people who looked down on us. We were tired. We were hurt. We needed to heal." He turned back to face the delegation. "So we healed. We rebuilt. We remembered who we were before we joined the Council, and we became that again. We built systems that work for us, that we control, that we maintain. We created a civilization that values every person's contribution, no matter how small. We found peace. That is wonderful, Kes said carefully. But will you help us? No, Hyun said simply. The word fell into the room like a stone into still water. Grix leaned forward in his seat. Please, Administrator, I have studied what your people did for us. I know now how much we lost. If you do not help, the Council will collapse completely. Billions of beings will suffer. That is not humanity's responsibility, Hyun replied. His voice was not cold, just factual. We gave you 150 years of service. We maintained your systems. We solved your problems. We did everything you asked and more. And you called us adequate laborers. You dismissed us as janitors. You made it very clear that we were beneath your notice. We were wrong, Kes said desperately. You are begging us to save you from the consequences of your own pride. Hyun sat back down. That is different from actually valuing us. If we return now, nothing will change. You will be grateful for a few years, maybe a decade, but eventually you will forget again. We would never, Grix began. You would, Hyun interrupted gently. Not because you are evil, but because it is easy to forget the people who make things work, the ones who keep the lights on and the air flowing, the ones who fix problems before they become disasters. That work is invisible when it is done well, and you will always think of it as simple, as beneath the notice of great civilizations. Kes felt something breaking inside him. Then there is nothing we can offer? No way to convince you? I cannot speak for all humanity, Hyun said. I am just one administrator. But I can tell you what I believe most of us feel. We are tired of being needed, but not valued. We are tired of being essential, but invisible. You want us to come back and save you, but you do not want to change the way you see us. That is not enough. The delegation tried everything. They offered more wealth. They offered entire worlds. They promised council leadership, permanent seats in the highest governing bodies, monuments to human achievement. Hyun refused it all with patient politeness. You mistake kindness for weakness, he finally said. You mistake service for servitude. We served willingly because we believed in the dream of galactic civilization, but you taught us that the dream was a lie. The Council does not want cooperation between equals. It wants a hierarchy with some species on top and others on the bottom. We refuse to be on the bottom anymore. Men, but if you do not help, billions will suffer. Kes pleaded, one last time. Billions suffered in silence while we were there, Hyun replied. The difference is that now, the suffering is visible to you. Tell me, Minister, did you ever visit the agricultural stations humans managed? Did you ever see the conditions people worked in? Did you know that 7 humans died from equipment failures last year, and the Council investigation ruled it acceptable losses from routine operations? Kes had not known. He felt shame wash over him. We mourned those people, Hyun continued. We built memorials for them. Adequate. He stood again. You do not get to discover our value only when you need us. You should have valued us all along. The delegation left Earth with nothing. They had failed completely. The journey back to Council space was silent and grim. Kes spent most of it staring out the window at the stars, thinking about all the ways the Council had failed, all the opportunities they had missed to treat humans with basic respect. Grix worked on his data pad, compiling a report of the meeting. He wanted to document everything Hyun had said, every argument he had made. He suspected these words would be studied for generations, assuming the Council survived long enough for there to be generations. When they arrived back at the Council station, they delivered their report to an emergency session. The chamber was silent as Kes described the meeting. Hyun's refusal. Humanity's reasons for staying away. Some council members looked angry. Some looked devastated. Some looked resigned, as if they had expected this outcome all along. Chair Thon sat at his platform, perfectly still. When Kes finished his report, Thon spoke in a voice that was barely audible. Then, we have failed completely. Through our pride and our blindness, we have destroyed what took thousands of years to build. There must be something we can do, another council member said desperately. There is nothing, Thon replied. The humans have made their decision, and they have every right to that decision. We took them for granted. We dismissed their contributions. We treated them as servants rather than partners. Now, we face the consequences of those choices. He stood slowly, his body unfolding with obvious effort. He looked old now, ancient and tired. I hereby resign as council chair, effective immediately. I led us to this disaster through my arrogance and short-sightedness. Let someone wiser take my place and try to salvage what remains. Thon left the chamber in silence. No one tried to stop him. No one spoke in his defense. He had led them to ruin, and everyone knew it. In the weeks that followed, the council tried to continue. They assigned new teams to critical systems. They attempted to recreate human solutions to problems. They worked desperately to hold together what was left of galactic civilization. But it was not enough. It was never going to be enough. The council was built on human foundations, and those foundations were gone. Everything else was just scaffolding without support, waiting to fall. On Earth, Hyun filed his report on the meeting and went home to his family. He felt no satisfaction in his refusal, no triumph, only sadness for what could have been if the council had chosen differently. If they had valued cooperation over hierarchy. If they had seen humans as partners instead of tools. But they had made their choice, and now humanity had made theirs. Sometimes the price of pride was simply too high to pay. 5 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council ceased to exist as a unified body. It did not collapse in a dramatic moment. With declarations and final sessions, it simply fragmented, piece by piece, as member species realized that the great dream of galactic unity was dead. Some species formed regional coalitions, smaller groups of worlds that could actually cooperate effectively. These coalitions often did well, freed from the bureaucracy and politics of the massive council structure. They learned to value each member's contributions, to share work fairly, to build systems they could all maintain together. Other species retreated into isolation, focusing on their own systems and avoiding the chaos of galactic politics. They built defensive networks and kept to themselves, trading carefully with trusted partners, but avoiding larger commitments. It was a lonely existence, but safer than the alternative. A few species collapsed entirely. Those who had relied most heavily on council infrastructure, who had never bothered to learn how to maintain their own systems, who had treated technical knowledge as beneath them. Their worlds went dark, one by one. Their populations evacuated or diminished. It was a harsh lesson in the price of arrogance. Kes found himself leading one of the new regional coalitions, a group of 12 species who had decided to learn from past mistakes. They called themselves the Cooperative Network, and they built their alliance on principles that seemed obvious in retrospect. All members were equal. All work was valued. All knowledge was shared freely. The cooperative struggled at first. None of them had humanity's gift for making incompatible systems work together, for understanding every culture's needs, for solving problems that seemed impossible. But they learned slowly, painfully, through trial and error. They made mistakes and fixed them. They argued and compromised. They built something that worked, even if it was smaller and less grand than the old council. Kes thought about the humans often. He wondered if they watched the galaxy's struggles, if they felt any satisfaction in being proven right, if they ever considered returning. He hoped they were happy in their isolation. They had earned it. Grix's report became required reading at every university and training facility in what remained of galactic civilization. The invisible pillars, how humanity held the stars together, was studied by engineers, diplomats, leaders, and scholars. It became the foundational text for a new generation that was learning to see value in work that previous generations had ignored. Young students read about human contributions with a mixture of awe and shame. Awe at what humans had accomplished with so little recognition. Shame at how badly they had been treated. The report sparked countless research projects, attempts to recreate human solutions, studies of human culture and philosophy. A new field of study emerged, called cooperative systems theory, based largely on human approaches to problem solving. The core insight was simple but revolutionary. The most important work is often the least visible, and the beings who do that work should be valued most highly. It seemed obvious once stated, but it represented a complete reversal of how galactic civilization had operated for thousands of years. 3 young aliens arrived at the edge of human space in the 5th year. They were students, 1 Vrelix, 1 Myriadon, and 1 Drachnor, who had spent years studying Grix's report and everything they could find about human culture. They came with a simple request: to learn. They waited in the same orbital station where Kess's delegation had waited. But this time, the wait was shorter. After 5 days, they were granted an audience. Not with Administrator Hyun, who had retired, but with Ambassador Sora, who had returned to diplomatic service. Sora was in her 50s now, her hair streaked with gray but her eyes still sharp. She met the 3 students in the same simple meeting room and listened to their request with interest. "We do not come asking humans to fix our problems," the Vrelix student said nervously. "We come asking to learn how to fix them ourselves. We want to understand how humans think, how you approach challenges, how you build systems that last. And why should we teach you?" Sora asked, not unkindly. The Myriadan student answered, "Because we cannot bring back what was lost. But we can try to build something better. And we believe that human knowledge can help us do that, if you are willing to share it. We will work for this knowledge," the Drachnor added. "We will not ask for it as a gift. We understand now that nothing valuable comes free, and that all work deserves respect." Sora was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her younger self, standing in the council chamber as humanity announced its departure. She thought about all the years of frustration and dismissal. She thought about the decision to leave, the relief of coming home, the peace of the past 5 years. But she also thought about the dream she had once believed in. The dream of different species working together, learning from each other, building something greater than any could build alone. That dream had died in the old council, killed by pride and prejudice. But perhaps it could be reborn in a different form. "I will need to consult with others," she said finally. "But I believe we can arrange something. Not a return to the council, but an educational exchange. You come here, you learn, you go back and teach others. And perhaps, in time, we can build new bridges between our peoples." The students agreed eagerly. They stayed on Earth for 2 years, studying at human universities, working alongside human engineers and diplomats, learning not just technical skills but the philosophy behind them. They learned about cooperation and humility. They learned to value invisible work. They learned that the beings who keep the lights on are just as important as the beings who make the speeches. When they returned to their homes, they brought that knowledge with them. They taught others. They built new systems based on human principles. They spread the ideas that would slowly transform what remained of galactic civilization. More students came over the years. Human teachers began traveling to other worlds, carefully and selectively, sharing knowledge with those who were ready to learn. It was not the grand reunion some had hoped for. Humanity never rejoined the Council because the Council no longer existed. But connections were rebuilt slowly, based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. Jiwon lived to be 93 years old. He spent his final decades in a house by the ocean, tending a garden that was his great pride. He never returned to space, never left Earth again. But he watched the news from other worlds with quiet satisfaction. On the day before he died, he received a message from Kes. The old minister was still alive, still leading his cooperative network, still trying to build something better. The message was simple. We understand now. We are sorry. Thank you for everything your people gave us, even when we did not deserve it. Thank you for the lesson you taught by leaving. It was the most valuable gift you ever gave us. Jiwon read the message 3 times, then deleted it. He did not need thanks. He did not need apologies. He had made his peace with the past long ago, but he smiled as he deleted the message, a small, sad smile that held both sorrow and hope. That evening, Jiwon sat in his garden and watched the stars come out. Somewhere up there, beings from dozens of species were working together, valuing each other's contributions, building a better civilization from the ruins of the old one. Somewhere up there, young students were learning that all work has dignity, that all beings have worth, that the most important contributions are often the least visible. It was not the future he had hoped for when humanity first joined the Council. But it was perhaps a better future than that would have been. Sometimes things had to break completely before they could be rebuilt properly. His granddaughter Nari found him there an hour later. She was 10 years old, bright and curious, and full of questions. She sat beside him and looked up at the stars. "Grandpa," she said, "my teacher told us that humans used to live up there, with lots of other species. But we left. Why did we leave?" Jiwon was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because they did not see us, little one. They needed us, but they did not value us, and we decided it was better to be alone and respected than together and dismissed." "Are we still alone?" "No," Jiwon said, and he found that it was true. "Not anymore. Some of them are learning to see differently now. Some of them are becoming friends instead of masters. It took a long time, but they are learning. Will we go back to the stars? Someday, perhaps, when they are ready to see us as partners, not servants. When they understand that the people who fix things and grow things and maintain things are just as important as the people who rule things. Perhaps one day. Eri. Nari thought about this for a while, then asked one more question. "Do you think they will ever really understand?" Jiwon looked up at the stars, at the vast galaxy that had once dismissed humanity so casually. He thought about Kes's message, about the students who came to learn, about the new civilizations being built on principles humanity had tried to teach. He thought about change, slow and painful and necessary. "I think some of them already do," he said finally. "And that is enough. That is more than enough." They sat together in the garden as night deepened and stars filled the sky. Human ships orbited far above, watching the galaxy with patient care. Not as participants, but as guardians. Not as servants, but as equals, waiting for the day when equality would be truly understood. That day would come, Jiwon believed. Perhaps not in his lifetime. Perhaps not in Nari's lifetime. But it would come, because humanity had left quietly, without anger or violence, and in that quiet departure had taught a lesson that would echo through the ages. Those who do essential work should never be taken for granted. Those who maintain civilization should never be dismissed. And sometimes the greatest act of strength is not staying and fighting, but walking away with dignity and letting others learn from their mistakes. Jiwon closed his eyes and smiled. The lesson had been taught. Now it was up to the galaxy to learn it. Humanity's work was done, but their legacy, their quiet, powerful legacy, would endure among the stars forever.